Alright, everything looks good. I'm on YouTube and Twitch live right now. So just to start, my name is Dan, and this is going to be the Kowalski Report. So I'm pretty much here just trying to do some, political commentary, maybe individualistic journalism. Um, but to get started, just to give you some background into why I'm live streaming here today and want to continue to. But yeah, so I mostly want to start streaming just to kind of get my opinion out there. I've noticed, disconnect in the media, at least our mainstream media, and, actual events and how things actually occurred, and compared to, individualistic journalism as well as, other states' journalism and news sources. I've noticed a clear bias in our news source from time to time, especially when it comes to, the White House. It feels very much like whoever is in charge controls, public opinion and, the verbiage that's used in, articles when there's breaking news. A lot of times we'll see the media only use the White House press briefing or press releases. We'll only see them use their verbiage exactly. And I think that leads to, you know, um, it leads to the White House being able to control public opinion, I feel like. And, when we have that, these multi-billion-dollar conglomerate news sources, they also have their own biases, and they want to portray their own opinions as well. There's always, an economic backing in these industries. And so I just wanted to kind of be an individual that can put news forward and share sources and share, ways that I like to vet news sources, and make sure that, we're not getting things from just one source. It's mostly that I feel like, especially today, we're all reliant on social media to get information. And, when we use like TikTok and Instagram, anybody can post anything. You can see anything from anybody. And a lot of times I don't feel like we're, going the extra mile to make sure the things we're seeing are accurate. And a lot of times we will just regurgitate that stuff. And I think it leads to disinformation, and it will definitely make things worse in the future, especially with, Donald Trump being in power for the next 3-4 years, him having full control of the White House and, essentially, in my opinion, having control of the mainstream media because of that. We've already seen MSNBC fire certain people because of their opinions on, Palestine, Israel, being anti-Trump. This isn't just MSNBC. We've seen it across multiple news sources at this point. So there's been a lot of different reasons, and it started with, I feel like, the Israeli and Palestinian war, or at least in my opinion, it is a genocide. But I think it started with that, and seeing how our news source fails to report on it, and when they do report on it, it's very little, and the words are very selective. They definitely try to use, words that will make Israel look good, make Palestinians look bad, constantly talk about Hamas when it comes to things that we should be having conversations about civilians for, like we saw in Mamdani's campaign. You're constantly asked to denounce Hamas when nobody's ever asked to denounce IDF or Israel. Even if you're just talking about civilians, you're talking about the genocide, it's always, oh, you're a Hamas supporter. And I think the news has absolutely contributed to that trend. But with that, there's also, like, this isn't a new thing. We've seen in the past, even as early as the early 1900s, Theodore Roosevelt talked about how the news was kind of inflaming things, inciting violence almost. He got shot, and he almost blamed the news in certain aspects of it. He said if they don't change, things are only going to get worse. And, back then we had Democratic parties, Republican parties, and socialist parties. Now that's almost a foreign concept in America. Largely, I think, due to, the Red Scare, McCarthyism, the Truman Doctrine, and just the spread of almost imperialistic capitalism. But we also saw it in, Vietnam, Korea, the way the military is almost the vetter of what can be released in those wars. And so that alone, I think, was a big contributor to how public opinion was swayed in those wars, and how we saw those wars or how we didn't see those wars. Because the losses weren't shown, only the wins were. It made it look like we were doing great things. We were freeing people from communism, where in reality, sometimes we committed like mass genocide. Like we were the bad people at a lot of times in history. But at this point, it just feels like the news sources have gotten lazy. They've kind of coddled up to the billionaires, coddled up to the administrations, and it's not just a Donald Trump administration. This happened during Biden. We always saw Biden administration says. We never really saw reports about what Biden said, because a lot of times in the last 2 to 3 years of his campaign, he wasn't really running things as much as we would have liked. So a lot of times I feel like the news sources would portray words with almost like a, hey, Biden's administration did this, Biden's administration said that, but it was never Biden. It was always making it seem like it was Biden when it never was. It was always people in his sphere. But at this point, my goal is just kind of to spread information and make sure that people are getting a different opinion, a different perspective, and maybe seeing extra sides to the story that they haven't before. Our generation is very exclusively using social media for news, and with the rise of Joe Rogan, Hassan, Tucker Carlson, Dean Withers, there's so many new just social media exclusive news sources and journalistic approaches and political commentary, and so at this point, we're being backed into our own spheres of politics and almost bipartisanship, to the point where we're just being fed the same things over and over again and the same opinions over and over again. So yeah, I just mostly wanted to come on here and give my own analysis of things and show different perspectives, show different facts, and hopefully maybe change some minds, maybe educate some people on certain things. But yeah, that was kind of my intro. Today's episode, I mostly want to talk about Zohran Mamdani's campaign and how that's affected American politics, how I think it'll continue to affect American politics, and how it's been an example, I think, for a lot of candidates, and will continue to be an example for a lot of candidates. Let's see. So yeah, the first topic I wanted to talk about was, the cooperation with Brad Lander that we saw. We had Zohran Mamdani, a democratic socialist Muslim, and Brad Lander, a Jewish Democrat. They kind of teamed up, campaigned together, did their own thing together, and worked towards, having a better city. Whether that meant one of them would lose or not, they accepted that, and they understood that they had almost like a common threat, which, in this example, I feel like was Andrew Cuomo, and Donald Trump, Eric Adams, but we ended up seeing Zohran Mamdani win. Brad Lander, I think, played a part in that because of the way they were able to come together, but largely I think a lot of it was Zohran Mamdani's own accomplishments. He basically made this race a global race. Like I've never heard about a New York City Democratic primary as much as I've heard about this one, or any city for that matter. He ended up getting on everybody's screens. He, I think, utilized the fact that politics has become an entertainment industry, and he used it to his advantage. He made younger voters show up more than they ever have. He got a lot of voters that have never showed up in primaries, and he got them to show up, using humane, populist ideas that, he calls himself a socialist, but he won't explicitly, go out there and say these are socialistic policies, because I feel like that word scares a lot of people. A lot of people think of communism when they hear socialism. And I think in our country, there's still a lot of, repercussions or remnants of the Red Scare and just how much we demonized communism, socialism, anything that would be close to either of those things. We just kind of labeled the Russian threat, Russian spy, and they need to be, denaturalized, sent out of the country, or imprisoned due to that. But yeah, they came together regardless of, color of skin. It was diversity in ideas, diversity in culture, and they overcame that and showed, they were almost an example of New York City and of what most people I think of as the founding ideology of America, like immigration, having diverse cultures, different points of views, different colors, different coming from different countries, coming from different backgrounds. Like they just kind of represented New York City in a way that I don't think we've seen people represent any of their constituents as well as them. Like just the fact that they were two diverse candidates coming together, overseeing any differences they had, and working together towards a common cause. But they also utilized the fact that on a global scale, they could advertise to people that weren't even in New York City. They kind of, especially Zohran. I don't know too much about Bradlander. I only really saw a lot of their cooperation, but Zohran, I feel like, thrusted himself into this global view with his background and with how the media covered him, with how Democrats didn't cover him as much or didn't endorse him as much, and continued to endorse Cuomo even after loads of controversies, including being Netanyahu's lawyer, being pro-Israel, the 13 or 12 sexual harassment claims. There was also, I think, corruption with his book. He had staffers writing it, I believe, and promoting it. He used, the government to essentially help with that book and getting funds for that book and selling that book and advertising for that book. It does seem like him and Eric Adams are going to run as independents, so it'll be interesting to see how that goes. I do think Zohran Mamdani has it in the bag, and we'll see that come out in November. But my next topic was going to be kind of how Zohran Mamdani has, I think, influenced other candidates to run, especially younger candidates, with maybe more populist, humane, for the people views. Mostly I'm thinking of Kat Abigzala, Deja Fox in Arizona, Abdel El-Salad in Missouri, and I think they all have kind of built on Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez's campaign, that grassroots, publicly funded, no big political PACs to fund them, and they just went off of, their constituents and their outreach. But I especially wanted to highlight, with Kat Abigzale's campaign, she has done a very interesting thing that I haven't seen much. She's almost used every step of the way to promote helping people, and it's not been seen, I feel like, where she's had she had a comedy show where it was pay what you can, so it could be free if you were not able to afford it, but if you could afford it, you could do a bigger donation. So it was welcoming. And then she had campaigns where she would have people come to events, and the admission price was I think it was a box of pads or tampons that would then be redistributed to people who needed them. And I believe in her campaigning office, there's even I think a set of shelves and stuff where you could bring things you no longer need or bring things other people may need, and then people who are less fortunate or needed things could come in and actually receive supplies and get help from someone who's campaigning to be a representative for their constituents. So it's surprising to see. I don't think we've seen a non-money funded only advertising where the money is spent, just trying to her campaign is the only one I've seen where every step of the way they want to help people or outreach to people in a good, positive way. So even if they do lose, every step of the way they've helped people. Every step of the way they've met people, diverse groups of people. I think she sponsored 2 pride parades, and then there was a Juneteenth parade as well, I believe. So she's very involved. And I think her campaign especially has been very interesting to highlight. And I think a lot of it, coincides with Zohran Mamdani's. I think she's trying to kind of oust herself in a global way that I don't think other campaigns really have. And the fact that she's doing all of this while every step of the way helping people is really, really going to set a good example along with Zohran Mamdani's campaign and, the cooperation and, setting up humane populist ideas that I think our country is going to lean more towards, especially after Trump. I think it's going to be like a rubber band effect, essentially. We've gone so far to the right, we're just going to have to, or at least I think we're going to eventually rubber band to the complete opposite and just go into probably someone more far left, like maybe Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez or Pete Buttigieg, who's a little more centrist, I feel like, but compared to Trump, he's probably very far left. But yeah, we've seen both of them, or multiple of these newer campaigns like Deja Fox and Kat. They are coming pretty close to being able to win their primaries. Like, they're single digits behind. The top candidates in front of them are like lifetime politicians, and both of them are people who have exclusively not done like politics their life. They're younger people. Kat, I believe, has done like reporting and like analysis of online people. Like, I think she mostly did Tucker Carlson stuff, and Elon Musk. She was disposed by in court because of the fact that she was, saying mean things about him on Twitter, and he didn't really like that. But yeah, I think she was second in the polls at this point, single digits behind. Same thing with Deja. And so I wanted to actually bring up some of their posts here. So this one, I believe, is for Deja. So yeah, 25-point jump for Deja. Now within the margin of error, 8 points behind the front runner. She has a really good chance, and we see here May 13th to 16th, 2025. She was at 10%. So she's jumped heavily. She's gotten her outreach out there. She's been doing pretty good. I feel like, she's another one of those candidates who has the populist, humane ideas and wants to represent her constituents. And she's, getting outreach and using it for good. But then this one is for Kat. I believe this is a video.
In the 9th District of Illinois, and I have some very exciting news to share about my campaign. We ran a poll, and the results show that I am just single digits away from the lead, ahead of 5 career politicians, and I have the most room for growth. So why does this matter? Well, when I launched this campaign in March, I was considered a long shot. I am a journalist and researcher, not a career politician. I'm not funded by corporate money. In fact, our average donation is just around $31. And I wasn't born here. The 9th District is my chosen home, just as it is for hundreds of thousands of transplants, students, and immigrants. But in just 3 months, we have taken this campaign from relatively unknown to just behind the frontrunner. And his popularity is inherently tied to name recognition. But it's not just about my race. This is proving that our grassroots model works. When I launched my campaign, I asked the question, what if we didn't suck? And that wasn't a joke. I thought that maybe instead of pissing away billions on consultants and fancy fundraisers, maybe Democrats could try a new type of campaign model. That's why we use our funds and resources to not only reach voters, but materially improve their lives right now. Our campaign-sponsored events are affordable and accessible to everyone. We hold food drives and beach cleanups, and our campaign office in Rogers Park doubles as a mutual aid hub. When it comes to my values, I prefer to show instead of tell. And this poll shows that our style of campaigning is working. Politics doesn't have to be closed doors and corporate cash. It can include and serve you. Right now, to win, our priority is getting our name recognition up. More than half of voters are undecided, which means we have 8 months to not only inform them about our campaign, but also earn their vote. There are a lot.
So yeah, she's definitely been like an inspiration, honestly. Seeing her campaign compared to others, big difference. Just helping people, like she said, with the mutual aid in her little office where people can come and grab supplies that they may need. The beach cleanups. It's just using her campaign for good, using the funds that they get for good, using the outreach aspect of it for good. You haven't really seen that, even presidential elections, state governor elections. Like, I have not seen any grassroots campaign. Well, I mean, I have seen a few grassroots campaigns, but none to the point or the extreme where the goal is to help people like hers is. It's honestly not even close. But The next thing I wanted to talk about was Abdul. He's a U.S. Senate candidate. He used to be a doctor. Let me pull up his page here. But he's another one of these like grassroots campaigns, I feel like, where he wants to help the people. He's very populist, humane. He was a doctor, and he kind of realized the government agencies are who decide what care gets to who, and preventing sickness and illnesses. And we've been seeing a lot more of that with like the big beautiful bill or whatever, with just cutting Medicaid and Medicare, food SNAP, and how that's going to affect our country for a long time. We're going to see more of people, dying or not being able to get care due to it, just because the funding's not there, because we wanted to give tax breaks to the rich. So yeah, he is used to be a doctor. He rebuilt Detroit's health department after bankruptcy, restructured Wayne County's Department of Health, Human and Veteran Services. He served 1.8 million Michiganders. And like some of his accomplishments here are he secured free glasses for kids who needed them, removed lead from Detroit's elementary schools, took on Michigan's biggest polluters, and then made life-saving Narcan universally accessible, which is a really good thing. We've seen like Bobby Kennedy try to make it not as accessible, which is unfortunate, especially as someone who went through addiction as himself. He's kind of making sure other people don't have access to things that they may need to try to get out of these dark places. But yeah, then you also have, he spearheaded a program that will cancel up to $700 million in medical debt for 300,000 Michiganders over 2 years. He was recognized as the Public Official of the Year by the Michigan LCV. But yeah, he's another one of those like newer grassroots campaigns that I feel like we'll see kind of thrusted into the global scale, and we'll see how that goes. But then I think the next thing I wanted to touch on was actually a video from Mamdani. It's kind of video. It's a video of him talking about winning and protecting the Haitians whose TPS status is going to get revoked in, I think it's September. I think it's 500,000 Haitians who are going to have this revoked, and then they're going to be eligible for deportation. And so he kind of mentioned how he's going to be like he's going to try to protect and fight against those changes, and he pretty much says he's going to fight Donald Trump in it. I'll just play it here.
Zohran, Mamdani! Sakosha, New York City! How we doing? It is such a pleasure to be here with you. My name is Zohran Mamdani, and I'm here to say that as the next mayor of this city, I will be proud to stand up for Haitian New Yorkers every single day. We are going to fight to get ID off the travel ban. We are going to fight Donald Trump when he tries to end TPS. And we're going to stand up for ID because you taught the world about freedom. It's time for us to return the favor. Thank you.
So yeah, we're going to see a lot of fighting between him and Trump, I feel like, especially in the judicial, especially with the new changes where federal nationwide injunctions aren't going to be possible, or at least not without like the Supreme Court deciding so. And so every state is going to have their own judicial fights and decisions until the Supreme Court comes and fights certain things. So it's going to be interesting, especially with New York City being like a sanctuary city for undocumented immigrants. And after TPS is removed for these Haitian immigrants, there's going to be more ICE in New York City. And with Mamdani, who said he would put himself in front of ICE to kind of stop his own constituents from being deported, it'll be very interesting to see if he wins the mayoral race, how he fights against Donald Trump. There was a video, I believe, of Donald saying that he would look into deporting him, I think. Let me find it here. He said he may be here illegally, or he's hearing that, and that he called him a communist, and that we skipped over socialism and right to a communist, which doesn't really make sense. But here's the clip.
Your beloved New York City. Your beloved New York City may well be led by a communist soon, Zohran Mamdani, who in his nomination speech said he will defy ICE and will not allow ICE to arrest criminal aliens in New York City. Your message to communist Zohran Mamdani?
Well, then we'll have to arrest him. Look, we don't need a communist in this country, but if we have one, I'm going to be watching over him very carefully on behalf of the nation. We send him money. We send him all the things that he needs to run a government. And by the way, they get about 3 times what you get, Ron. If you look at the per capita, Florida gets 1/3 of what New York gets in terms of the numbers. Why don't you give us those numbers?
Yeah, well,
because that's what we should send him.
Yeah, well, sometimes people say Florida gets more because they count Social Security recipients, but that's not money to the state. Those are seniors that live here. If they moved to North Carolina, you could count it there. So it has no interaction with the state government. They get more in the city and state governments than we get.
Right, substantially. We're going to be watching that very carefully, and a lot of people are saying he's here illegally. We're going to look at everything, and ideally. He's going to turn out to be much less than a communist. But right now, he's a communist. That's not a socialist. I've always said, we will not have socialism in this country. In the speeches, I said, well, what? They skipped socialism. And you got a lot of them like that.
Mr. President, your beloved...
2 things I want to highlight. First, the Gulf of America hat is crazy. Bro's really trying to make that happen. And then Ron DeSantis' comment about Social Security. And now, the seniors live there, and just highlighting the big population of seniors in Florida is kind of funny. But, saying that he's, a communist and he skipped over socialism is kind of crazy. He hasn't really talked about privatization of any industry. He's only really talked about having, government-funded markets, like food markets. And that's the only, big socialist, idea I feel that he's even proposed. I've seen nothing about privatization of any industries, of housing. He mentioned freezing rent, but as he said, his previous mayors have already done that multiple times. So I'm not really sure where he's getting this jump from socialism to communism from, and his rhetoric about we're going to be watching him very closely reminds me of the 50s and 60s COINTELPRO or whatever. With the FBI watching these civil rights movements activists, people who are alleged communists, and then sending them death threats and really bad stuff with that. Just the insane surveillance of these people, and also making that claim that he could possibly be an illegal alien. It's kind of crazy. We're only at this point because he's won the election, or the primary election. And so it's kind of crazy to see him just make these jumps, especially about Mamdani, who's been such a pacifist, honestly. The only thing he's really said he's going to fight against is Donald Trump and his, deportations, mostly. It's only really been about the ICE factor. But, yeah, it's kind of scary to see Trump talking like this about this candidate. We've already seen, Charlie Kirk talk really badly about him, really bad about him, almost blatantly Islamophobic, and that's, I feel been a trend on the right with Mamdani's election here. We've seen a lot of we need to deport him, denaturalize him, get him out of New York City. It's crazy, it's scary, but yeah, I think then since we were talking about the Supreme Court decision with the federal injunctions, the other thing I wanted to mention was that was constantly used against Biden, especially with the college funding. So now to see the Supreme Court go against it now in 2025 under Trump, it's very telling. It's very showing that the Supreme Court is pro-Trump. They want to see his policies enacted. That conservative bloc has definitely pushed Donald Trump's agenda. We saw that with abortion. We saw that with this federal injunction. We even saw it with, I think they recently said that religious claims can be used against things in school, like LGBTQ books or whatever. So we're going to see more out of them next year, and with the fact that there's no more federal injunctions, I feel like a lot more things are going to end up being brought up to the Supreme Court, and that's going to be scary next year, especially in June when they, like to pack their biggest decisions into the end so that, they don't have to deal with it. But I think next I would talk about, the undocumented immigrants. We're still on that topic here, where at this point we've seen, in California, Los Angeles, we've seen the protests that have turned to riots in one way or another. We're going to see that pretty heavy in New York City. I feel like if this continues with Mamdani and the rhetoric around Donald Trump continues, it's going to be interesting. New York City being a lot more densely populated, a lot more liberal, I feel like. The support from Mamdani, he's gonna try his hardest to not let ICE work with law enforcement to make sure that they can be deporting people in New York City. He's gonna fight them, I feel like, which is gonna be interesting. So let's see. Yeah, I'm pretty much at the end of my list here, honestly. Let's see. I guess the next thing I wanted to do was watch this video from 4 years ago from Mamdani actually talking about public housing. So in this video he kind of talks about how public housing was done in, I believe it was Austria he talks about. He mentions how they, at least until this day, have 60% public housing, and the rent in those houses are only up to $400 to $600 a month, and those can be subsidized even further with depending on your income levels and tax bracket. So yeah, I'll just let him talk here. It is a pretty long video. I might pause it a few times.
American housing is in crisis. Right now, up to 12 million Americans are behind an average of $5,800 on rent and risk eviction. With eviction moratoriums soon to expire, we're facing an unprecedented wave of evictions and foreclosures that will crash straight into millions of struggling families across the country. But the truth is, this crisis didn't begin with the pandemic. In fact, housing has been in crisis for a very long time. Even before the pandemic, in places like New York or Los Angeles or San Francisco, median rents for even one-bedroom apartments could approach $2,500 a month or more. About a third of people in Los Angeles spend a majority of their income on housing. In New York City, about 20% of all renters pay most of their income to their landlord. And in my district, Astoria, about a quarter of residents have to spend most of their paycheck on rent. And the crisis isn't just in big cities. In 95% of all US counties, workers making the minimum don't make enough to afford a one-bedroom rental on their own. The Harvard Center for Housing Studies warns of a new normal for housing in the United States, in which nearly half of all renter households spend almost a third of their income on rent. That's why even before the fallout from the coronavirus started to hit, more than 500,000 Americans nationwide were already homeless, millions more on the brink of losing their housing, and countless families struggling every month to make ends meet. At the root of all of this suffering is the fact that in this country, housing is treated as a commodity, not a right. It's a consumer product, just like clothes or cars, that private businesses can sell on the market to make a profit. And if someone isn't able to pay, either because their landlord raised their rent or because they can't work for one reason or another, they're not able to stay in their homes. If they're lucky, they can live with friends or family, or maybe in transitional housing for a bit. But for a lot of people, they have nowhere else to go, and they end up sleeping on the streets. In December 2019, the number of people sleeping in homeless shelters in New York reached 19,000 people, an all-time high. 100,000 New York City students are homeless. That's more than 10% of the entire student population. Why do so many people end up homeless? It's not because there aren't enough homes to go around. There are plenty of empty homes. No, it's because housing people is not the primary goal of developers or landlords. Their goal, simply put, is to make a profit. And it's much more profitable to build luxury apartments for the rich than decent homes for the poor. This gives us a big shortage of homes for ordinary working people. For every 100 households that are extremely low income, there are only 36 affordable and available homes. As a result, we have plenty of housing for the rich, but poor and working class people don't have nearly enough on the market. So we have people scrounging to make ends meet or sleeping on the streets right below luxury condos and uninhabited apartments. This is a terrible way to organize a housing market. It might be profitable for landlords and developers, but it's not efficient or beneficial for the rest of society. In fact, housing doesn't have to be seen as a market at all. In other countries, housing is considered a fundamental right, like education.
So this is where Trump is calling him a communist. I guess this is probably his most non-capitalistic, farthest left discussion, talking about housing being a human right. We talk about healthcare, education, and I feel like a lot more people in this country are on board with that. But with housing, I don't even think a lot of people think about it. So this is kind of the only video I found where he actually almost takes a capitalistic approach. But even in this video, he shows how there is still a privatized version of housing. So it's not like he wants to privatize the entire industry of housing. He would just want to create more public housing. And, that's kind of the one way that we can fix the housing crisis. One way, there probably is a bunch, but, a lot of people aren't really putting forward an actual solution. And I feel like this is one of them. This is a good one of them, I feel like.
Or healthcare. That means the government goes to significant lengths to guarantee everyone has a home, and the market plays a much smaller role in the construction and distribution of housing. So let's hop across the pond and about 100 years back in time to take a look at just one example of how an alternative housing model got started in beautiful red Vienna. At the end of the First World War, the Austro-Hungarian Empire collapsed, leaving behind a number of successor states, including modern-day Austria, home to the former imperial capital of Vienna, the 5th largest city in the world. Despite being the seat of an empire, the chaos of the war and decades of neglect had left the working class of Vienna in desperate circumstances. Inflation was rampant, jobs were scarce, social services were non-existent, and hundreds of thousands of people were crammed into decaying tenements where overcrowding, disease, and violence were rampant. So it's no surprise that in 1919, at the first elections ever held in Austria where all adult citizens could vote, the Social Democratic Party swept into power at the municipal level on the promise of dramatic social and economic reform. And they delivered. The new government of Vienna implemented a huge range of services, including public health care and public child care. They built high-quality hospitals, schools, and recreational facilities. But their crowning achievement was an ambitious program of social housing, what Americans call public housing, that began in 1923 and saw 60,000 new apartments constructed in the first year of its existence, built by the government.
It's always interesting to see how in the early 1900s there was so much more socialistic, communistic practices, and I know we saw the Red Scare with America and how we almost imperialistically pushed capitalism onto other countries, but it's interesting because now we only have Republicans and Democrats, and a large part of Democrats will never be on board with socialism or communism, and so seeing how the 50s and 60s and the Red Scare have really pushed down these aspects of our our beliefs and our country's politics have been interesting. Just seeing that we've lost a lot of ideas just because we are scared to be called a socialist or a communist, like Donald Trump did to Zohran Mamdani. But it's interesting. I think we're going to continue to see these policies demonized by the Trump administration, and I hope it doesn't discourage Democrats, but they've already, I feel like a lot of, the leaders have already discouraged Mamdani and his views and policies that he's put forth, but I'll just let this finish here.
Government and financed by taxes on the rich. But these weren't the kinds of apartments you might picture when you think of public housing in the United States. Drab high-rises plagued by chronic neglect and underinvestment. Residents could enjoy leafy courtyards, wide-open spaces, and plenty of natural light. They had shared laundries, state-of-the-art kitchens, food co-ops, bathhouses, pharmacies, lecture halls, schools, and swimming pools. These apartments were designed to be both beautiful to look at and beautiful to live in, fostering a sense of shared community among the people who lived there. And the best part was that because the city didn't have to worry about making a profit, just about paying off their maintenance costs, these homes were both much nicer and much cheaper than what workers had previously known. In 1926, the average rent in Viennese social housing was about just 4% of a monthly wage. The first 15 years after Austrian independence saw its capital transform from a symbol of urban blight into a beacon of socialist governance. It became known as Red Vienna, after the official color of the socialists who had pioneered these changes. And even though Red Vienna fell in 1934 when the country was seized by fascists, who did what they could to roll back social housing, that commitment to good, cheap housing remained after the Second World War. Today, an astonishing 62% of all city residents live in social housing, with the average monthly rent falling somewhere between $400 and $600 a month, with subsidies for lower-income tenants. That is a fraction of what people in America pay. Unlike in the United States, where public housing is treated as a worst-case way to house the very poor, Vienna's social housing residents are extremely diverse. Everyone except the top fifth of the population is eligible to live in social housing. This means there's broad appeal across many segments of society, which creates the foundation for its political popularity. That is how the majority of people in Vienna enjoy something that's considered almost utopian here in New York. Affordable housing that isn't just cheap, but desirable. Housing that isn't just four walls and a roof, but a real home, with a sense of stability, safety, and community built in. Now, of course, this is only one example of an alternative framework for housing. And Vienna has not fully removed housing from the domain of the market. Residents still pay part of their earnings in rent to cover operational costs, and a sizable chunk of the population lives in private housing. But it's an actually existing alternative that shows us what a step toward a better world could look like. If we want to end the housing crisis, the solution has to be moving toward the full decommodification of housing. In other words, moving away from the status quo, in which most people access housing by purchasing it on the market, and toward a future where we guarantee high-quality housing to all as a human right. So how can we do it? We can start by making sure people who access housing on the private market have ironclad protections against abuse and exploitation. But to go further, toward the Vienna model, we'll have to go beyond the market. We can establish community land trusts to gradually buy up housing on the private market and convert it to community ownership. We can give tenants a right of first refusal to buy out their landlords when buildings go up for sale. And we can fully commit to a new era of social housing, ending subsidies for luxury housing development and using our wealth to build beautiful, high-quality social housing projects that offer good homes and strong communities to everyone. We won't decommodify housing overnight, but we know what we have to do, and we have history to guide us. And we know how we'll get there, through a movement of the multiracial working class organizing for the better world we know is possible. And we've already begun. I'm Zohran Mamdani, Assemblyman for New York's 36th Assembly District in Astoria, Queens, for the Gravel Institute.
It's a good video, and that was from 4 years ago. It's interesting to see another solution that worked elsewhere, especially when we're seeing capitalism continue to not work for us, when there's been such a hoarding of wealth in the top 1% and, an inequality over the rest of the country in terms of money and being able to afford things even. But yeah, it would be nice to see something happen like that in America. Prices just keep going up, especially when it comes to housing. And I don't think we'll see that change if we continue down the path we have with capitalism and commodifying housing and, having landlords just essentially only want homes for profit. When you have that, prices just continue to go up and up. And you see, like in New York City with the rent freezes, it doesn't fix the problem because you still have landlords involved who only want to make a profit. And so when there's rent freezes, they don't want to do anything. They don't want to fix things. And it creates another problem, whereas something like this would be a different solution that we haven't seen. But yeah, that was 4 years ago from him, when he was just a assemblyman. But then I have another video. This one's actually from today, where he goes over like the win from the Democratic primary.
1 week ago, we shocked the establishment and redrew the political map with a campaign relentlessly focused on the needs of working people. Since then, a lot of people have asked me if I was surprised by the results.
Ooh. It's got some good quality.
In some ways, I was. We always thought our victory would come after multiple rounds of ranked choice voting. So when we got more first-round votes than Eric Adams got in 7 rounds in the last election, it was astonishing. But in other ways, this was always the plan. We wanted to rebuild a coalition that had frayed over years of disappointment and neglect, to win people back to a Democratic Party that puts working people first. So let's break it down. Last November, New York City saw some of the biggest shifts towards Donald Trump of anywhere in the country. Much of it took place in working class and immigrant neighborhoods. A few days after the election, we went to Hillside Avenue in Queens and Fordham Road in the Bronx, not to lecture, but to listen. And what we heard was a desire to bring down the cost of living. That was our focus, and many of those voters came back. Brighton Beach went for Trump by 44 points. Last week, we won it by 16. College Point was a plus 11 Trump neighborhood. We took it by 8 points. We saw similar or even bigger swings in Bath Beach, Astoria Heights, and the North Shore of Staten Island. The headline is clear. We can win back voters many have written off if we give them something to vote for, not just tell them what to be against. When Eric Adams eked out a win by 7,000 votes...
He made a really good point there that I agree with. He said, what was it? Yeah, we can win back voters many have written off if we give them something to vote for. In this country, especially after the election of Donald Trump, we've demonized pretty much anybody who voted for Trump, anybody who still believes in Trump, or anybody who has any ounce of conservatism in them. But I think he makes a good point here, even though it was just a quick excerpt of this entire video. He mentions, if we give people something to look forward to, something to vote for, something to believe in, actual policies that can put forward change, you can sway people. You can show them that there is an alternative, that, it's not just the hard way. It's not just these establishment Democrats or these establishment Republicans where nothing really gets done over time and they're both swaying towards the same moneyed, lobbied interests that are on both sides. So I think he makes a good point about giving people something to vote for, giving people something to look forward to. And I think hopefully if we have a 2028 election, we can see that with a candidate. I don't feel like Kamala Harris did enough of that. It did feel mostly like an anti-Trump thing, but also not wanting to stray too far from Biden or portray him in a bad light. So a lot of punches were held in terms of policies and opinions. But I also feel like Kamala was a establishment Democrat, and her beliefs on Israel, her beliefs on immigration, they were very along the lines of Trump. So a lot of people didn't see her as an alternative. It was just another establishment person, and a lot of people even looked at Donald Trump almost as this anti-establishment person. And although you could definitely argue he's an anti-establishment person, he's just a selfish person, I guess I would say. He's not for the establishment, he's for himself. And his policies are only to make him look like he's winning. We saw that with the ceasefire in Iran and Israel and the strike in Iran. It was very much a story to portray him as the winner in those situations. And it's the same thing with immigration. He wants to go to the criminals, the violent immigrants, but he's not doing that. He's getting rid of as many immigrants as he can. He's got Stephen Miller behind him, talking in his ear about just all immigrants being bad. So I just hope we have a candidate who will, put forward actual change, who will show that they actually believe in something, and that it's not just for, some super PAC or some, way to sway public opinion. But yeah, I'll let him continue here.
Many have written off if we give them something to vote for, not just tell them what to be against. When Eric Adams eked out a win by 7,000 votes 4 years ago, he called it a mandate and pronounced himself the new face of the Democratic Party. Even then, it was a little ridiculous. But in some neighborhoods, he did put up impressive margins. Take Flatbush, for example. Eric Adams dominated there, double digits ahead of his next rival. On Tuesday, there was also a double-digit victory, except it was for us, over Andrew Cuomo. We flipped Crown Heights by 45 points, North Corona by 33, and Jamaica by a staggering 57 points. These are the outer borough voters that Eric Adams said he'd bring with him to City Hall. He served as donors instead. Whether we're talking about young voters, older voters, or just plain disaffected New Yorkers, no campaign in recent history has been as successful at driving new voter registrations, especially in the 100 days before the election. Just take a look at this graph. According to the Times, in the 14 days before the registration deadline, about 37,000 people registered to vote. That's over 10 times the number of new registrations over the same period of time in the 2021 mayoral primary. As a result, we won big with zero prime voters, New Yorkers who had not voted in any recent mayoral primary. For instance, in Gravesend, at least 32% of all voters were first-time primary voters. Most campaigns focus on triple primes, New Yorkers who voted in the last 3 primaries. But this strategy ignores most of our city. Yet we knew that we could turn them out if they saw themselves in our policies. We ran a campaign that tried to talk to every New Yorker. Whether I could speak their language,
आपकी वजह से हमने $8 million रेज किया है, 6 लाख से ज़्यादा दरवाजे खटखटाए हैं,
or just tried.
que se comprometa al bienestar.
All the words are new! And the coalition that came out on Tuesday reflected the mosaic of these 5 boroughs. We won South Asian neighborhoods by huge margins in places like City Line, Ozone Park, Jamaica Hills. We won Latino neighborhoods like Corona, Washington Heights, Pelham Bay, and Woodhaven. We won many of the same Chinese voters that turned out for Trump in Flushing, Chinatown, and Bensonhurst. And in the final months of the campaign, we narrowed Andrew Cuomo's once sizable lead with black voters, outright winning young black New Yorkers in neighborhoods like Harlem and Flatbush. Andrew Cuomo and his super PAC spent more than $31 million. That's about $87 per vote. We were focused on affordability, and it cost us only $19 per vote. But what you did for us was worth so much more than what money could buy. The result? We shattered everyone's expectations, including our own. A Cuomo spokesperson put it best, saying they had not foreseen our ability to, quote, expand the electorate in such a way that no turnout model or poll was able to capture. Conventional wisdom says the left can only win low turnout elections. We rewrote the rule book by, get this, talking to New Yorkers. Politics in this city won't ever be the same, and it's all thanks to you. The next chapter begins today, New York.
I think you made a good point with talking about like playing to the base of people who don't normally vote in like primaries or vote at all. Like getting people to vote. Like those same people that don't normally come out for primaries are going to be the same people that come out in November to vote for him. And I think we're going to need to see that on a national level with the next election. I mean, I think Trump kind of was able to do that in his own right, get people who hadn't voted prior or in prior elections to come out for him. I think that's largely how he beat Kamala. Like he was able to push himself more towards a global scale. He made a story that made him as the winner, not even just the winner, the savior even. His story about immigrants being murderers, rapists, bringing drugs into the country, pretty much all of that. He made himself seem like the only one who could fix it. And because Kamala just kind of went with it and said, we do want to deport the criminals. She kind of fed the narrative that it is a bigger problem than it actually is, when we've seen Trump only really use it to get support for his election and use his presidency to attack immigrants regardless of... Oh no, my camera. Hold up. Alright, well, I think we're going without the camera for the rest of this. Let me go back to this article. But yeah, I think he kind of played into the same thing that Trump played into, which was voters who don't normally vote. And he gave them something to look forward to. He gave them ideas. He gave them policies. He gave them, like a dream almost. I kind of think at this point that was everything that I had. Let me check my list here. There was one other video, but it mostly related to, you know, that big, beautiful bill or whatever, big ugly bill, whatever you want to call it. It was mostly talking about how the Republicans have just... Democrats gave them a choice where, you know, they proposed amendments that were basically saying, like, will you not make tax breaks for the rich in order to keep Medicaid funding and SNAP funding? And at every step they just said no. So it was... Yeah.
That this narrative is about how we're all about the wealthy.
We can save health care for millions of Americans if we strip out tax giveaways for individuals making more than $10 million. Yes or no?
No. No's appear to have it. No's do have it.
We can help parents be able to take their kids to the doctor. We can keep seniors in their nursing homes if we strip out tax giveaways for individuals making more than $100 million a year.
Nay. No. No's appear to have it.
People are going to die when 17 million people lose their health care. And for what? To give an average $250,000 tax cut to the wealthiest families. This amendment would just say no tax cuts for people making over $500 million.
All opposed, no. No. The no's appear to have it.
So my amendment is really simple. People making $1 billion.
All opposed, no. No. The no's appear to have it. The no's do have it. Motion's not agreed to.
You can already tell.
Yikes. I mean, the smirks from that guy is crazy. It's insane. They know what they're voting for. They know that this is for the billionaires and the millionaires. Like that, the last guy literally said, we'll stop the tax breaks only on the billionaires. And it was a no. It's kind of crazy. I am curious to see what happens in the House with this bill. They already passed a version of it once that I don't think was as extreme when it came to Medicaid. I think it was a little bit less. I mean, it was still over 10 million people that would be kicked off of Medicaid, I think almost immediately. And then there was another like 5 to 7 million that would be kicked off over time through the healthcare like marketplace that's set up. They would get kicked off of that, their coverage there. But yeah, that's pretty much everything I had, especially when it comes to Mamdani and this report here. Let me just check my list. Oh yeah, the last thing I was gonna go was just like, you know, more of his policies that I agreed with, like being pro-Jewish people in New York City. Like he's very open to the fact that he's going to work with Jewish people, very open to the fact that he cares about the Jewish constituents, but he's also anti-Israel, anti-Zionism, and he recognizes that it is a genocide there. He's been very open about it, and he was the only candidate who said he wouldn't go to Israel, like off the bat, which was just such an insane question to begin with, and it's crazy that he was the only candidate who wouldn't outright say, I'm going to go to Israel. It's very interesting, especially with the New York City primary debate. It kind of shows you how our media is for Israel, for the United States government, for the administration at its helm. I believe there's another interview with Cuomo, or sorry, not Cuomo, Mamdani. Was it NBC? There was one interview, not this one, there was another one. Interview. There was one specific interview where the interviewee was very almost like anti Mamdani. Oh, I think it was this one. This is 3 hours though. Is it CNN? Okay, yeah, I think it's this one.
An epic battle. New York Mayor Eric Adams formally announcing tonight that he's going to go head-to-head with the Democrats' new rising star, Zohran Mamdani, as an independent candidate in the mayor's race in the biggest city in America. Now, we're going to speak to Mamdani live in just a moment. But first, take a listen to Mayor Adams' attacks right out of the gate today.
This election is a choice between a candidate with a blue collar and one with a silver spoon. A choice between dirty fingernails and manicured nails. This is not a city where you use idealism to state you're giving everything to everyone for free. There's no dignity in someone giving you everything for free. There's dignity in giving you a job so you can provide for your family and the opportunities that you deserve. So this is not a city of handouts. This is a city of hands up.
Adams taking direct aim.
Before I even start the rest, I kind of want to address that. It's more of just the almost lying about his policies, like just always going to give things away for free. But I mean, they know that when it comes to these kinds of policies, that it's going to be based on income. It's going to be based on tax brackets. They're very aware of that. They kind of know what they're doing here, especially Eric. It's the same thing with Trump, same thing with Cuomo. They just want to misrepresent his views and pretend that he's this communist that wants to give everybody free stuff, and when in reality he's trying to help the lowest income people who just can't get by with a job. Like, people have jobs and they still can't get by. So Eric Adams is just attacking Mamdani, just lying about what he wants to do, just pretending that he wants to give things away. And we've seen that those talking points used by Republicans and conservatives a lot in the past, especially when it comes to like healthcare and education. Like, it's giving things away, but these are things that I feel like, not that I feel like Bernie talks about it all the time. Other first world countries, they all have this better, almost free healthcare or education, and we've seen our education be so privatized and so commodified almost, to the point where people can't go to college without getting to insane amounts of debt, and no job is going to fix that. Like Eric Adams is talking about here, like, oh, we can give people a job, give them dignity, but the system's clearly not working, so we need to change it up. But I'll let them continue.
At the core of Mamdani's campaign, Mamdani has made economics the heart of it, right? Things like freezing rent on nearly half of the city's apartments, free bus service, free childcare for children under 5, and city-run grocery stores. Okay, well, the Adams news comes as our Isaac Dover is just reporting that former Governor Andrew Cuomo, who, of course, was crushed in that primary, who conceded it to Mamdani, will not drop out of the race before tomorrow's deadline. So now this raises crucial questions about whether he will also be running in the general election as an independent. But Mamdani's likely and seismic win over Cuomo in the primary is generating national headlines about him being a new political star, creating a movement. And from the left-leaning Nation magazine, they write the Democratic Party establishment should follow Zohran Mamdani's example. Out front now, New York State Assemblyman and presumptive Democratic nominee for mayor of New York, Zohran Mamdani. And so much appreciate your time. A whirlwind week for you.
She did that whole segment with him just sitting there. That's crazy. She just talked in front of him about him and about this campaign. That's very interesting. It's just a funny dynamic.
I think to put it lightly. Okay, so, everyone else is putting their view on this, of what this means, okay? Your victory. What do you think it means?
I think it means that we are ready in the most expensive city in the United States to have 5 boroughs that New Yorkers can actually afford. And this entire race was about the question of affordability. And ultimately, I have run a campaign that speaks about the tools that city government actually has to deliver that affordability in the wealthiest city in the wealthiest country in the world. And it's time that we have a mayoral administration that follows through and actually delivers that.
All right, so I want to talk about some of that, but first the breaking news. Isaac Dover is reporting that Andrew Cuomo is not dropping out of the general election race, right? And it's kind of a will-or-won't-he, but the deadline's tomorrow. Is this a surprise to you?
Ultimately, Andrew's decision or my decision matters less than the decision that voters already took on Tuesday night, where we won from Bay Ridge to Dyker Heights to Harlem to Washington Heights. We saw a mandate delivered for a new generation of leadership. And I am so proud and excited to continue to build on that mandate with an ever-expanding coalition, one that has now included the endorsement.
I don't love the usage of the word mandate. We saw Trump use that, and he mentioned Eric Adams used that. I feel like just because he won doesn't mean we should be calling it a mandate, especially because it's only a Democratic primary. We haven't seen the actual full election. It's a strong word to use for anybody being elected, I feel like, even though I agree with most of his politics. And I think a lot of New Yorkers do agree with his politics. Calling it a mandate, it always feels too far to me, especially when it comes to elections and still it being only a primary. But I'll let him continue.
Of Congressman Jerry Nadler, of State Senator Brad Hoylman Siegel, and Manhattan Borough President, soon-to-be Controller, Mark Levine. And ultimately, that is a coalition that will continue to expand through November.
Right, so you're saying no matter what, I mean, if Andrew Cuomo's in, it's not like a redo where you're worried?
No, not at all. I mean, we did it once, and it turned out pretty well.
All right, so now can we talk about the policy? The policy is what stood out to a lot of people. But right, I said the freezing rents on half of the apartments, free bus service, the free childcare, and the city-run grocery stores. How do you pay for that?
Let's go through it. So for the first thing, freezing the rent, that's not something that requires any fiscal output from the city. It's something that's determined by the Rent Guidelines Board, composed of 9 members. The mayor picks each of those members. They determine each year whether rents rise.
I like her question, I guess, of how do you pay for that, but it feels very left-handed. I feel like a lot of times we don't see the news or media or interviewees talk about financial or economic aspects to policies a lot of the times. I mean, I know Mamdani he's mentioned publicly that he's going to use taxes on the rich or the more wealthy to do so, and I think he continues to talk about it, but it just feels very weird coming from her, especially in this like tone in this conversation. I mean, I'll let them continue, but it feels very much like this interviewer is almost like out to get him, but you'll continue to see that.
Or whether they stay the same. The previous mayoral administration froze the rent 3 times, so this has clear historical precedent. When it comes to city-run grocery...
Even Adams, you're saying Adams?
No, this is prior
to
Adams. He's the current one who has raised it 9% on those same New Yorkers, pushing them out of their homes. City-run grocery stores, I proposed a pilot program of 1 store in each borough. These are 5 stores in total. The total cost of this is $60 million. This is less than half the cost of what the city is already set to spend on a subsidy program for...
Hell yeah, Gregory. Hell yeah.
Corporate supermarkets that has no guarantee of cheaper prices or collective bargaining agreements or even accepting
SNAP. So you're not looking at some like Soviet Union grocery stores on every corner that are going to be run by the government?
No, what I'm looking at is how to solve the very clear twin crises of affordability when you go to the grocery store and food deserts, which disproportionately impact Black and brown New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs, where I've heard directly from New Yorkers who say, why is it that I can find 6 fast food restaurants in a 5-block radius, but I can't find a place to buy groceries?
But five boroughs, 5 grocery stores, but that can't be the goal.
Well, I mean, the idea
is the goal you want them on every? I mean, but in New York, things do go. There's a nail salon on every corner. There's a grocery store on almost every other corner.
I think ultimately I'm guided by outcomes. If this pilot succeeds in guaranteeing cheaper groceries, as I think it will be, then yes, it should scale up. If it doesn't succeed, then no, it shouldn't, because what New Yorkers want are results. And then it comes to making buses free and universal childcare.
Right.
These are things that cost around $700 million and let's say about $5 or $6 billion. Significant amounts of money.
Huge amounts of money.
But have to be understood in the context of a $113 billion municipal budget, a $252 billion state budget, and we put forward a plan to pay for these and more to start Trump-proofing our city through 2 major revenue streams. Increasing the top corporate tax rate of New York to match that of New Jersey, that raises $5 billion, and increasing income taxes on the top 1% of New Yorkers who make $1 million or more a year by 2%. Both of these things, after they come to fruition, you're still paying less than you did before Trump.
Okay, on the city tax though, and I know that takes effect with people right now, that top rate of people 50,000 or more. So if you're going to be adding 2% to people at $1 million, I just did the math, right? Well, but that's going to be an increase of 51% of what they pay now. I'm not saying cry for them. I'm saying
she's just blatantly wrong. I mean, she misunderstands how taxes work and tax brackets work. The 2% is only going to, affect what's above the $1 million or above, the tax bracket limitation that he's setting. And that 51% number is just kind of crazy. I mean, I know Mamdani wanted to do almost a 90% tax on anything above $1 billion, I think it was. And that's kind of a good thing, in my opinion. Like, we're making sure that these people they're able to live. Like, they have millions and millions of dollars. They can do whatever they want with that money. But after the $1 billion, you need to start helping out a little bit more. you're hoarding this wealth, and it needs to be, I don't want to say distributed, but it needs to go towards humane populist ideas that are helping the country and helping the least, the people who most need it, who are, what's the word I'm looking for? The least fortunate, I guess. So I agree with him. I think this interviewer is very anti-Mamdani and like pro-billionaire. It's interesting to see how even CNN, who's like the democratic news source, at least the people would say in America, even they are just like swatting down his ideas, throwing things at him that just aren't true, trying to portray him in negative lights. But I'll let them continue. I know he talks more about like how the taxes will actually work.
Saying if they leave, you're not going to get that money. And when you increase someone's taxes by 51%, aren't a lot of people going to leave?
We're saying we're increasing it.
I hate to pause again, but I know there was Massachusetts enacted something very similar to taxing the most wealthy, and people didn't leave. We had, them stay. They contributed more in taxes because they liked the city. They liked the state. Like it wasn't about the taxes. It was about what they were doing there. It was about the community there. It was about the culture there. So I mean, if there are billionaires who don't want to pay up, like they can leave if they want to, but like it's about the community. It's about the culture. It's about the place that they're living in. So I mean, if they don't want to help out, so be it. Like they can go somewhere else and keep their money if they want to continue hoarding the wealth. But it's just it's very interesting that we're like trying to protect these billionaires.
2% of what it is right now. And ultimately, I'm guided by the facts. The Fiscal Policy Institute did an analysis of the top 1% of New Yorkers and found that they leave the city at 1/4 the rate of other income categories. Mm-hmm. And when they do leave, they leave to what are called high tax states, New Jersey, California. So what it then comes down to is, why are they leaving? Is it fiscal policy or is it actually quality of life? And I've heard that time and again from wealthier New Yorkers, from all New Yorkers.
So it's talk. They're going to go to Florida and all you think is talk.
In 2021, when I came to the State Assembly, we had the same...
You think it's talk? It's this interviewer. This whole interview feels just anti-Mamdani.
Fight to fund public schools, to raise taxes on billionaires and corporations. We were told millionaires would flee.
Yep.
And we now have more millionaires.
Okay, so the New York Times is saying that Mayor Adams is trying to gather business leaders to support him, to say this is going to be bad. And Bill Ackman, billionaire hedge fund manager, of course you know of him, New Yorker, he said he agrees with you that the city's broken, okay, but he has a real problem with your economic policies. He said the ability for New York City to offer services for the poor and needy, let alone the average New Yorker, is entirely dependent on New York City being a business-friendly environment and a place where wealthy residents are willing to spend 183 days, the amount you need to be taxed, and assume the associated tax burden. Unfortunately, both have already started making arrangements for the exits. So you just think that that isn't going to add up. And by the way, that corporate tax rate that you're talking about, that's a big increase.
That's matching 7.25% going to 11.5%. And the point of it is that if it works for our regional neighbor, why can't it work for us? And with Bill Ackman, this is someone who put $500,000 into Andrew Cuomo's super PAC, someone to whom clearly money is not an issue. And ultimately, even for him, life would get better. Because what I'm looking to use this money for is to make the quality of life across the city better.
Okay, so when people say democratic socialist, right? And I'm curious what you think this.
I love how she just kind of ignores everything he says. She, she'll bring up all these other people who have these opinions and, oh, it's just talk, or, oh, you don't think they're going to leave. But he's bringing actual statistics, he's bringing facts, he's bringing other examples of it. I think that's part of the reason she's not really responding, is because she can't really respond to it. It's just, oh, you don't think it's going to happen? Oh, you think it's going to happen? Like, it's all speculation. And it's weird to see the speculation be used against him in this way. But yeah, I do feel like this interviewer is very anti-Mamdani.
I mean, do you like capitalism?
No, I have many critiques of capitalism. And I think ultimately the definition for me of why I call myself a democratic socialist is the words of Dr. King decades ago. He said, call it democracy or call it democratic socialism, there must be a better distribution of wealth for all of God's children in this country. And that's what I'm focused on, is dignity and taking on income inequality. And for too long, politicians have pretended that we're spectators to that crisis of affordability. We're actually actors, and we have the choice to exacerbate it, like Mayor Adams has done, or to respond to it and resolve it like I'm planning to do.
Okay. So, for people who say that America was built on, and a lot of immigrants, and obviously you speak from an immigrant experience. I mean, you came as a young child, but you speak to a lot of people who came much more recently, that they come to America because they believe in capitalism. They believe that if they work hard and make a lot of money, that's part of the American dream. Do you think that's not part of the American dream?
I think the dream at its core is a dream for stability in one's life. And what you're saying, that you work hard enough and that you then reap the benefits, too many New Yorkers, and Americans for that matter, are working 8 hours and then still feeling like they haven't made enough money to keep living in the city they call home. And ultimately, what I'm focused on is making the city affordable for everyone, not to win an ideological argument, but to deliver on the mandate of this
So when Mayor
campaign.
Adams, you just heard him come out and he said soup, silver spoon. He talked about manicured nails to refer to you, right? I was looking at him. You can show him to everybody. What do you say to him?
I understand what he's doing. He's trying to distract from his own record. His is a record where he raised rents on more than 2 million New Yorkers by 9%, and he's considering another 8% increase. His is a record of raising the water bill to the highest it's been in 13 years, supporting Con Edison when they wanted to increase New Yorkers' gas and electric bills by $65 a month. I would much rather talk about me than I would about his record if I was him. And so that's what he's going to be doing over the next few months. And we will continue to remind New Yorkers what's on the ballot. It's affordability.
I just want to play, because that's what this is, play more.
Oh, God. I know with Eric Adams, the mayor, he talked about how Cuomo's running from his record, Mamdani has no record, and he's the only one running on his record, allegedly. But he has corruption charges. He had Trump's DOJ be the ones who stopped those charges, which means that they can also bring them up at any time. So his record is being in Donald Trump's back pocket at this point. And like Mamdani said, increasing prices, including rent, including the water bills. I mean, the fact that he even ran as an independent, I feel like is just telling enough. Like, he didn't feel like he would be welcomed by his own Democratic Party. So it's funny. I don't think Eric Adams has a chance, but I do fear, the two independents and a Republican running against our DNC Mamdani. I do fear the fact that they'll steal votes from him. I don't think it'll be enough to steal the win, but it will be interesting. It'll be probably a closer race than I feel like a lot of people expect, depending on how he continues to campaign throughout the next few months here. He's got, 3 months at this point, 2-3 months. So, I mean, I think he's going to continue to, talk about Trump, and I think that's going to highlight him and throw him into the global view a lot as well. But it'll be interesting, and I think we're about to continue to see this interviewer, play this, devil's advocate with him because she kind of wants to make him look bad and show her opinion and her bias here, even though it's CNN, the allegedly Democratic news source. But let them continue.
Mamdani telling his story.
So to quote the words of a famous New Yorker, allow me to reintroduce myself. I was born in Kampala, Uganda, in East Africa. I was given my middle name Kwame by my father, who named me after the first prime minister of Ghana.
I moved to this city when I was 7. This is the city I fell in love with, the city where I got my citizenship.
He's been in the New York Assembly for 4 years, and before that, he was an aspiring rapper under the name Mr. Cardamom. Listen. Once you do it, it's out there. It never comes back. It's there.
Didn't think it was going to be on CNN.
It's there, and there it is. So what do you say to people who look at your background and they wonder? They say, okay, rising star you may be, but this is the largest city in America, $112 billion budget, 8 million people, and a hell of a lot of problems. And they say, okay, whatever the future may be, you're not ready now.
I would say that a campaign offers a glimpse of what an administration would look like. And we built a campaign the likes of which the city has not seen in a long time. We started with 2 full-time employees and now are managing 50,000 volunteers. At the beginning of this race, there were questions of whether we'd get 50,000 votes. And yet we had 50,000
volunteers.
50,000 volunteers who knocked on 1.5 million doors, made 2.1 million phone calls. And ultimately, it's a story of not only being able to inspire people, but absorb that inspiration and build an organization. And I think that's also the story of what it means to run a city, that you are ultimately responsible, but you're also determined by hiring the best and the brightest. And that's what I will be doing in City Hall. I'll be hiring those that have a clear track record of excellence, of results, that come from a wide variety of mayoral administrations, and finally bring public excellence back into the public sector.
All right, so you caught a lot of attention for confronting Tom Homan, Trump's border czar, about the deportation policies, which have a lot of impact here in New York. Here you are.
Do you believe in the First Amendment? Do you believe in the First Amendment, Tom Homan?
So that moment went viral, all right? Then after the primary, Homan was asked about your plan, which is on your website. You said that you would end the city's cooperation with ICE agents that has been going on under Mayor Adams. And he has spoken out. Here's what he said.
Good luck with that. Federal law trumps him every day, every hour of every minute.
And showing which part, the anti-Tom Homan or the songs.
We're going to be in New York City. Game on. We're coming.
Game on. He's coming. What do you say?
That I'm going to be here to stand up and fight back. And unlike the current mayor, I'm not going to be working alongside the Trump administration to build the single largest deportation force in American history. I'm going to actually represent each and every New Yorker. And that includes immigrant New Yorkers. And that means standing up for the laws of this city, like our sanctuary city policies, which have kept New Yorkers safe for decades and were defended by Republicans and Democrats alike for years until we got this mayor who fear-mongered about them so extensively.
Does that involve the NYPD?
It means that the NYPD would actually serve New Yorkers and not assist ICE in their operations. We recently saw ICE agents.
So they would not assist ICE?
Not assisting ICE, because ultimately their job is public safety. And I know officers who are signing up to take on serious crimes, not to be a part of the force that is arresting a pastor who's peacefully observing the arrest of a migrant at Federal Plaza.
I feel like what he just said about, the cooperation with NYPD and ICE further exacerbates like the fact that Trump's administration and the DOJ have Eric Adams in their back pocket almost, with the corruption charges that they explicitly threw out and stopped looking into and investigating. Like, they have Eric Adams in their back pocket. He's going to continue to have ICE and NYPD collaborate. And I'm surprised we haven't seen more about that in New York City, like more backlash. I mean, we saw that video of Mamdani, like just being outspoken about Tom Homan and the fact that he is almost anti-free speech, like with the Homeland Security, going out and like revoking visas or protected status. It's crazy. But hopefully if he does end up as the mayor, we'll see more fighting ICE. Like, I don't think we've seen much of it beyond Los Angeles and like the riots and protests. It was kind of like the first point of contention with the mass deportations. And I think New York City under Mamdani is going to be another example of that. And I think it'll be interesting to see how Trump handles Mamdani. We showed that video earlier of him saying like, oh, he might be here illegally, or we might try to denaturalize him or deport him. It'll be interesting, especially with him as mayor. Going up against Trump in the biggest city in the country. It's going to be a lot of judicial fighting. So I'll be interested to see it, but I liked the songs. The songs were good. We need to see more of those. It was beautiful, but I only think they showed them to kind of discredit him, because I think like right after they showed the songs, or right before they showed the songs, they were like, oh, so what do you say to people that say you don't have a history, even though he's literally like a state assemblyman? But it was the same thing with Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Kamala. Like, it's just that, oh, what do you say to people who say you're not qualified enough? But like Donald Trump, Reagan, they had no politics, and they still won president of the United States. So talking about like experience is it's always just like a gotcha, I feel like, that they try to use against people that they dislike or that they oppose. But I don't know. He won the race, so we'll see. We'll see what they continue to do in the actual election with Curtis or whatever his name is, the Republican candidate. Even though I don't think he's going to get much coverage. He barely won any votes against Eric Adams, so I think he's just going to fall into the background in this race unless he gets like supported heavily by Donald Trump or some sort of PAC. But yeah, my main interest of his mayoral debut will be how he handles Trump and how Trump handles him, for sure.
All right, so a moment ago, you talked about how you didn't know if you'd get 50,000 votes, and you ended up with 50,000 volunteers. They knocked on doors. There are many in the country who might look at that and say, okay, that makes me think of somebody else who took on I'm trying to think of the right word to use, but somebody who expected to win and therefore didn't campaign that hard and lost. And the person who did that was Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, right? Famously also here in New York. She endorsed you early. She helped you. She just spoke to Manu Raju, our Manu Raju, a few moments ago. She said the Democratic Party needs to pay attention to your success right now. Here's what she just told him.
We have a choice to listen to that message that people are sending us or not. This isn't just about Mr. Mamdani as an individual. This is about the message that the people of New York City are trying to send to our party.
So there's now talk, that your victory puts her in a whole new light, right? It puts her and Bernie Sanders, not that they were seen as fringe, but they were seen as a wing of the party. And that instead of being a wing, that becomes more of the center, and that you are part of that. Do you see it that way? And do you see those who say, look, your victory propels her to a presidential run in 2028?
She's been an inspiration, and it's been an honor to be represented by her as an assembly member in Astoria for many years. And I think about a senior who works at a child care.
He's definitely going to dodge that question, but I think she made a good point about the fact that his election and Alexandria Ocasio's election and, Kat Abu-Ghazaleh's upcoming election, Deja Fox, how the fact that they're gaining traction, they're coming on pretty close behind, lifetime politicians, but coming with grassroots organizations, coming with no PACs funding them, coming with humane, populist, almost socialist ideas, and they have good chances. I think it does propel AOC into the presidency of 2028. That'll be interesting to see if she ends up going for the DNC nomination. It'll be nice to have a DNC nomination for once, like one that we all actually agree on, maybe, if that happens. Like with Bernie Sanders being thrown out of the 2016 and 2020 one, with Hillary Clinton and then Biden. It would be really nice to have somebody that we all picked, somebody that we could all back, somebody that we all liked. And I do think that Mamdani's win, and, like I said, Kat, Deja, Bernie, AOC, with all of their wins, I do think it does create more of a left-wing ideology, like further left-wing, like wing, like she said. Like I do think she makes a good point. I do think Mamdani is going to dodge the question about presidencies, especially because it's such like a touchy subject for people. I feel like, especially politicians, even when asked about other people. But I do think he's going to dodge it a little bit here.
Senator that I met in Sunnyside, Queens, who told me that I'm not a progressive, but I realized when I looked at Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and Bernie Sanders, they were the only ones who were willing to fight for me. Yeah. And that's what so many New Yorkers and Americans understand, is that these are the two individuals who have been willing to take on this oligarchy and actually stand up for dignity for Americans.
Before you go, one last thing. Bill
He said more than I thought he would. He did kind of recognize that they are the ones fighting oligarchy and the ones that have been very anti-Trump and very anti-money in politics. And Bernie's been doing this for a long time, like 40, 50 years at this point. So, I mean, they do have like a reputation at this point of being the ones to fight for the people, like the people, not moneyed, lobbied interests. They've more so like actually talked to the people. They held their what was this, Stop Oligarchy tour or whatever it was. They held that, and like their their turnout was insane. Like things we haven't seen even in the presidential election. The turnout was bigger than those Kamala Harris meetings. So I do think they have a really good chance in 2028. I think Bernie is not going to run because he himself, I think, feels like he's too old and he wants to see the younger generation run. It would be interesting to see him as like a VP in that, like an AOC Bernie lineup, but I think he kind of wants to let the younger generation continue things and kind of keep like a hands-off approach while being like as partisan as possible and helping, as bipartisan as possible and helping as much as possible to try to get things done, especially when it comes to money in politics and the oligarchy and the wealth inequality. I think he'll continue to be an outspoken voice for it, and I do think him being who he has been as an independent for so long and continuing to fight for his people is the only reason we have AOC, the only reason we have Mamdani, especially after the 40s, the 50s, and the 60s with the Red Scare and like the McCarthyism, the Truman Doctrine, Hoover being the FBI head, and the COINTELPRO like spying on all the communists or alleged communists even. He's kind of been the only voice that's not been like money in politics for a long time, especially when it comes to like Democrats. Even though he's no longer a Democrat, he kind of like caucuses with them or whatever. He works with them quite a bit, especially compared to Republicans, who he's very opposed to because they are even more money in politic hungry. Like I think there was a clip the other day of Ted Cruz being asked, or he was talking about money in politics, and the colleague, I think it was Mr. Whitehouse or whatever, the guy with the last name Whitehouse, he had mentioned like Democrats have put up votes to stop money in politics, and Republicans continue to denounce it, continue to deny it, continue to be the ones who vote completely against it. I actually kind of want to find that video after this, but I'll let this finish.
Man, I just mentioned him as right. He's the billionaire hedge fund manager, but he's not.
Individuals who have been willing to take on this oligarchy and actually stand up for dignity for Americans.
Before you go, one last thing. Bill Ackman, I just mentioned him as right. He's the billionaire hedge fund manager, but he's not alone. There are a lot like him, whether it's Ken Griffin or CEOs of big banks. Would you meet with them?
I'll meet with anyone. I will meet with them and I'll explain why I believe in the necessity of raising the top corporate tax rate. And I'd also tell Bill Ackman that I firmly disagree with his attempt to dismantle diversity, equity, and inclusion across the country, because it's not only against the morals of so many, it's also against the actual bottom line for so many businesses. And as a businessman, he should understand that.
All right. Well, Assemblyman, thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Oh, they cut off the abrupt, like, the way she turned away and just started doing, like, the next segment or whatever while he was just sitting there. But, yeah, I mean, now that I think about it, it would be kind of cool to see Bernie, not as a VP, but, like a secretary of something, like Throwbro as the Secretary of Education or something, and have him fight for, like, free college or whatever. Or, like, honestly, any department, I feel like you could throw him on, and he just already has a vast amount of knowledge because he's been on so many committees. He's been in it for so long, like, if he's a part of any administration, I feel like he would do good, even if it's not VP or president. And he would absolutely get pushed through like a Senate confirmation hearing. I don't think there'd be a lot of people to like fight against him in that. But it would be interesting, like a Pete Buttigieg AOC ticket, and then Bernie as one of the secretaries would be pretty cool. But then what was that video? Was it White House Ted Cruz politics? Yeah, this is the one.
Thank you, Chairman. This hearing is a perfect display of projection, blaming your adversary for what you are doing. Dark money, judicial capture,
it didn't show.
Propaganda.
Hold up. It's this one.
Complete with lots of charts. I'll say a couple of things on free speech. First of all, our Democratic colleagues, when they address the issue of so-called dark money and campaign finance
4 years ago? I don't think this is the same.
30.
Is it this one? It might be.
Ted Cruz just got hammered, who took the rug right out from under him. Cruz thought he could go on autopilot when he appeared on Tucker Carlson's show, but many times
Colleagues never seem concerned by that massive money on the left, which is considerably larger than the money that is supporting Republicans.
Again, since you're speaking about me, that's also not true. I am the actual lead sponsor of an act that would end dark money, and it wouldn't end it just on your side. It would end it for everyone.
I love the actually looking into his eyes and talking to him, unlike Ted Cruz, like just bashing the entire Democratic Party or whatever. Like, he just straight up right in his face.
One would know who is funding people's campaigns. And every Democrat votes for that bill to get rid of dark money, and every Republican votes against that bill to protect dark money, largely because the fossil fuel industry's dark money is the lifeblood of the Republican political operation. You don't want to see that exposed.
So there you have it.
Yeah, I mean, then it starts with oil, APAC, all of the fucking conglomerates in our country just funding and lobbying Democrats and Republicans. Like, it's not a one-sided thing. It's not a new thing. It kind of reminds me of the fact that we had the CIA invading countries because we had specific businesses out there that wanted to make certain profits, and they wanted to, like, the governments wanted to privatize certain aspects like oil or like fruit production. Like, they wanted to privatize that, so the CIA went in because of the fact that we had businesses that were profitizing off of those businesses that were going to be removed. It reminds me of that, the fact that we had money involved in the invasion of other countries, like the regime change of other countries. We had moneyed interest just in that, and so to see them talk about it here and like say that it's a Democrat issue and they have so much more money in it, dark money, it's kind of crazy. It's kind of crazy because it's not a new thing. It's both sides. It's run our country for so long. Like, I feel like it's the reason we don't have education, the reason we struggle with the housing crisis, like Mamdani said in that one video about the decommodification of housing. It's the same thing with healthcare. Like, it's because of the fact that there's so much profit involved in it. There's so much money that moves around. It's never going to change if the lobbying is allowed, if it continues to be allowed, and we don't have candidates like Bernie, Mamdani, AOC, Kat Abu-Ghazaleh. We don't have these candidates who actually like put up for citizens. We have so many more candidates who just want to put up for the lobbied interests. And we see that with like the endorsements of Mamdani. Like, we've only seen like Elizabeth Warren endorse him. We've seen AOC and Bernie, of course, but there's just been such little reaction from the DNC, I guess. Like, we had Hakeem Jeffries go out and say, no, I haven't endorsed him, and I won't endorse him yet because I've never had a conversation with the guy. Like, you're the leader of the Democratic, like the House, I think it is. He's the House leader. Why haven't you had a conversation with him? This is the biggest city. He's been thrown onto a global scale. He's representing democratic values. He's pushing the party further. Why wouldn't you have a conversation with him? Why wouldn't you go out and do that? Like, at that point, it's on you. You're the one with the power. You're the one with the money at this point. It's just telling that he would say, oh, I haven't had a conversation with him. I don't know the guy enough. Like, everything's online. You can make an opinion without talking to him. And if you don't want to, you could talk to him. Like, it's not that hard, I feel like, especially as somebody in his position with so much power. He could talk to him if he just wanted to. He just doesn't want to. Let me try to find that video. Jeffries, Mamdani. I know it's this one.
Mamdani won a big victory. Have you endorsed him yet? I have not.
What the fuck are you doing? What the?
Oh my god. I kind of just wanted one that was just about what he said.
Say that he is far too extreme on economic issues and even issues involving Israel.
I'm curious what your thoughts are on him ideologically. Is that does he have an ideology that you would want your candidates in 2026 to have?
Well, from the standpoint of House Democrats and what our focus has been, clearly we have an affordability crisis in the United States of America, and our focus will continue to be on driving down the high cost of living in this country. Donald Trump promised to lower costs on day one. Costs haven't gone down, they're going up. He's crashing the economy in real time. His tariffs are going to impose thousands of dollars in additional cost on everyday Americans per year. And he may even be driving us toward a recession. It's the reason why Donald Trump has become so unpopular. It's because he's failed the country on the economy. And so our vision is going to be for an affordable America. Work hard, play by the rules, live the good life, provide a comfortable living for yourself and for your family. That means being able to actually afford a home, educate your children, have access to health care, go on vacation with your children and your family every now and then. And of course, Joe, one day retire with grace and dignity.
Say that he is for.
And he did not really respond to
say that he is
Mamdani claim in that video. He just kind of said, "Oh, we want to make sure things are affordable," but they don't really talk about how. Like, they haven't talked about how. It's still not the video I'm looking for. Mamdani endorse. Oh, here it is.
When we saw New York have the greatest swing towards Trump in the entire
Jeffries isn't quite ready to back the Democratic nominee Zohran Mamdani. Jeffries says he congratulated Mamdani, but a full endorsement? Not yet. Turns out the two haven't really talked. Jeffries wants a substantive.
When we saw New York have the greatest swing towards Trump in the entire nation, 11.5 points.
I cannot find this. Oh.
And so that's the next step in terms of this conversation right now. And that's worked. He out communicated.
Okay, yeah, this is the one.
I'm joined now by House Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries of New York. Let's start with the big news, Leader Jeffries, out of your hometown. Mamdani won a big victory. Have you endorsed him yet?
I have not. We had a conversation on Wednesday morning where I congratulated him on the campaign that he ran, a campaign that clearly was relentlessly focused on the high cost of living in New York City and the economy. He outworked, he out-communicated, and he out-organized the opposition, and that's clearly why he was successful.
So what's holding you back from endorsing him right now?
Well, we don't really know each other well. Our districts don't overlap. I have never had a substantive conversation with him. And so that's the next step in terms of this process, to be able to sit down, which we agreed to do in central Brooklyn, discuss his vision for moving the city.
So he wanted to make sure Cuomo lost first, the corrupt candidate. He didn't want to endorse the very obvious choice. And again, he had a single conversation with him on Wednesday. This is even his post. It's kind of crazy. No endorsement. It just says he had a conversation with him. He said he outworked the other candidates. He didn't really say that his policies were better or that he kind of knew his base and knew what he needed to work towards. He just kind of said he outworked him, or he outperformed him. It almost feels like not giving credit to the policies or the viewpoints that Mamdani holds that helped him get elected. But I've never had a substantive conversation with him, so I can't endorse him. It's still just crazy to me. Like, we don't see Jeffries do much when it comes to, like, fighting Trump. You know, they'll say they disagree with him. The last thing I remember was him sitting on the what was it, the House or the Senate steps or whatever. He just sat there with Cory Booker for however long, and that was the last thing I remember them actually trying to do to fight Trump and his policies. I mean, we saw Chuck Schumer bring forward, like, the the amendments to the big beautiful bill or whatever, we saw him try to bring the amendments to that, like saying we're going to force every single vote on these Republicans so that they can explicitly say what they mean, and they can explicitly show that they're prioritizing millionaires and billionaires over the working class people, and they're contributing to suffering while uplifting the rich. And they've gone on record saying that at this point because of the Schumer pushing like all of these very specific amendments, forcing votes on very specific things. Whereas with Jeffries, I can't really say that I've seen him do too much, honestly. I don't remember him saying much about the California protests or riots. Mamdani, he's clearly been disconnected from this mayoral race. He's just like, it's very similar to Schumer. Like, I know I mentioned he did force the votes, but even with Schumer, it's always been like a strongly lettered or a strongly worded letter that gets sent to Trump or Republicans or whatever. There's no substantive change. Like, there's no substantive conversation. They just kind of sit back. And I know you can say, like, hey, they don't have the power. The House and the Senate are controlled by the conservatives, but they continue to back Israel. They continue to talk about being okay with deportations. They think it shouldn't go as far as where Trump is doing, but they still continue to demonize immigrants in a certain light. I feel like, I'll let them keep talking here.
Forward and addressing the issues that are important to the communities that I represent, a very diverse district that I represent in Brooklyn, including many African Americans, many Jewish Americans, many Caribbean Americans who are dealing with a lot of challenges in the city and want to make sure that the next mayor of the city of New York, whoever that may be, is prepared to tackle them.
Mamdani calls himself a democratic socialist. He proposed, obviously, big tax increases, free mass transit, free bus fares, government-run grocery stores. Is this the kind of progressive socialism that we're going to see as the future of the Democratic Party, or is this unique to New York City?
I think that one of the things we've been clear about from the very beginning as House Democrats is that we need to relentlessly focus on addressing the high cost of living in the United States of America. This country is far too expensive for working class Americans, for middle class Americans, for all those who aspire to be part of the middle class. Imagine a country where every single hardworking...
I said that they've always done this in the House, but they've only really talked about this after Trump got elected. Like, under Biden, I feel like there was very little that they did or talked about when it came to affordability, and they had control of Congress at those times. They could have codified, Roe v. Wade. They could have put forward policies with housing and education. They saw Biden do executive orders to try to relieve student loans and stuff, but Congress never did anything. The House never did anything to make actual substantive change. So it's very hypocritical for him to come on here and say, oh yeah, we've always been for affordability, but it doesn't seem like they were until Trump was elected. They just wanted to keep the status quo until then. So now to then talk about it and bring it up when Mamdani is bringing actual populist, actual affordability changes, it's almost like he wants to pretend that they've been doing this all along, or that they've been trying harder to do affordability when they don't really have policies for it. They just want to stop Trump. They just want to stop the tariffs. It's not going to help us. It's going to bring us, if anything, it'll bring us back to when we were under Biden, and inflation was still, it was getting better under Biden, but it was still pretty bad. And economically, we were doing okay, but affordability for lower classes, nothing was changing. We didn't see any tax changes. Like, they continued to let Trump's tax cuts that happened in his first term continue. Didn't do anything about that. So it's just very hypocritical, in my opinion. Like, he's coming out here and he's only talking about affordability and using it to almost not denounce, but to almost demean Mamdani's campaign and pretend that, like, oh, we've been doing that too. But have you really, though? I haven't seen it, especially not under Biden. There wasn't much of a push to help people. And so now to see Mamdani do it, and then, like, they're very explicitly being asked here, like, oh, is this something that's going to continue across the DNC, across the Democratic Party, and go, oh, we've always been for affordability, but not to this degree, not to any degree really, but it's a complete difference. It's a cop-out answer, but it's just demeaning and hypocritical, I guess.
American taxpayer can afford to live the good life. Work hard, play by the rules, have a good paying job, good health care, be able to afford a home, educate your children, go on vacation every now and then, and one day retire with grace and dignity. The good life, the American dream. That is not accessible to everyone. And so I think it will continue to be important for all of us on the Democratic side to address relentlessly the issue of the lack of affordability in this country. Donald Trump promised to lower costs on day one. Costs haven't gone down, they're going up. In fact,
it's always Donald Trump. It's always this person sucks, or we're combating this person or this thing or this policy. But he's not mentioning policies. He's not saying what they're going to do for affordability. And even though he is doing a cop-out answer, he's doing a bad cop-out. Like at least give us some substance. Give us something to look forward to. Like Mamdani said in that video earlier, like, if you give people, like, a dream or something to look forward to, like, it doesn't matter. You don't have to demonize people. Like, just give them policies that are good. Give them viewpoints that are good. Give them things that they would like. Give them things to look forward to, instead of just saying, like, oh, we need affordability, and saying, oh, Trump's making it worse, and continuing to say, like, oh, the American dream, and work hard, play hard. Like, it's just, it's obvious they want to keep the status quo, and they don't want to make any real change to address, like, wealth inequality. You know, Bernie's been talking about that for God knows how long, but they just ignore it. They continue to push him to the side. They don't vote on things with him the same way. It's hypocritical, but it's sad to see. You know, I hope Mamdani's win, and, you know, hopefully if Kat and Deja win, and all the other, like, smaller grassroots organizations, or organizements or whatever, like all these smaller campaigns that are funded by individual donations, it would be cool to see that actually change how the DNC goes, and who gets put in charge of the DNC, and who gets elected for, like, the House leader, or, like, minority leader, and Senate leader. Yeah, I just hope things change, and, like, either we get a new party or we change this one up quite a bit to stop going for the status quo. Like, hopefully the candidate in 2028 is very far from what the DNC wants, honestly. Like, I hope it goes against how they've acted for the last 10, 20 years, because they've contributed to ICE, they've contributed to, like, all of the police states, like, everything that put Trump in power and everything that Trump is using now, they've contributed to it, they've used it, they've funded it, they've been on board with it for a long time. Like, it feels like the DNC is just a very slightly left version of the RNC. And I mean, we've seen the RNC get more and more right, I feel like, but the left just compromises or hasn't really moved enough, in my opinion.
Crashing the economy in real time, imposing these reckless Trump tariffs that are going to increase costs by thousands of dollars a year, and he may even drive us toward a recession.
You mentioned the diversity of your district, including a lot of Jewish constituents. Mamdani has made comments that some have said veer towards anti-Semitism. His initial statement after October 7th, he criticized the Israeli government but didn't criticize Hamas. He defended the use of the word globalize, or the phrase globalize intifada. And he even said that the Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu should be arrested, or he would, if he were mayor, he would arrest Netanyahu if he visited New York City. Do these things concern you?
It's kind of crazy that he's making that seem all terrible. Like, arresting Netanyahu is the ICC literally has a warrant out for his arrest. The Israeli courts literally have a corruption criminal case going against him. It's been going for 5 years now that he's trying to delay continuously. I mean, the IDF contributed to the Hamas attacks. I mean, it was terrible. It is terrible. And terrorism is horrible. But they had sources. They had information about these happening. They saw like the buildups of troops. They saw training, but they ignored them, and they kind of discounted these organizations and said they weren't strong enough to do anything that would actually matter. So it makes sense that he, villainized like the IDF or Israel after October 7th. Like, he saw that they were keeping Palestine or Gaza and the West Bank in occupation, and that's kind of how you get terrorism, honestly. Like, you're oppressing people, you have them as second-class citizens, don't let them leave, you control their food sources, their electricity, their taxes, and you cut it off at will because you want to continue to like starve people or demean their populations. And then you have settlements from Israel as well that continue to grow in the West Bank and Gaza, and that also contributes to it because there is a lot of settler violence that has gotten worse under Netanyahu, and he's been almost like a supporter of it. I think a lot of it has been in the background with there's this one major lady in the settler organizations and stuff called Danielle something, and she had mentioned that she has contacts with Benjamin Netanyahu, and he's okay with everything, and they definitely contributed to the fact that October 7th happened. Palestinian oppression is not a new thing. I think 2023 was the deadliest year for Palestinian children or something before October 7th even happened. But then after that, I'm sure it just kept going and got worse and worse with the genocide. And I'm sure that has completely shifted. But yeah, I think what he said isn't that crazy. I think our news just wants it to be, or wants to make it seem that crazy. And I know Jeffries is personally, pretty pro-Israel. So it'll be interesting to see his response to this. Let's see what he says.
Globalizing the Intifada, by way of example, is not an acceptable phrase, and he's going to have to clarify his position on that as he moves forward. With respect to the Jewish communities that I represent, I think our nominee is going to have to convince folks that he is prepared to aggressively address the rise in anti-Semitism in the city of New York, which has been an unacceptable development. And any mayor, whether you're a Democratic mayor, a Republican mayor, an independent mayor, has got to commit to the safety and well-being of all of the people of the city of New York. And when there are moments of crisis and a rise in anti-Jewish hate, that's a threshold, of course, needs to be crossed. With respect to the African-American and Caribbean-American communities that I represent, it's going to be important for our nominee to articulate the case for dramatically and decisively addressing the rise in gentrification and the housing displacement that threatens to continue to wipe out low and moderate income Black and Latino communities in New York City. It's an unacceptable phenomenon, and the next mayor of the city of New York has to be able to articulate a clear plan and commitment to address these concerns for the people that I represent and folks all across the great city of New York.
All right, let's turn to developments here in Washington. The Supreme Court, big decision, empowering Donald Trump.
Again, he gives like a really cop-outy answer. He talks about anti-Semitism in New York City and the rise of it, but like I don't want to do like whataboutism, but when I hear that, I think about the rise of Islamophobia, especially when it comes to Mamdani and his election, even from Democrats, even from conservatives. It's been pretty blatant, and it does make me. I do fear like the rhetoric could lead to violence, especially when it comes to Mamdani. He lives in New York, one of the most densely populated areas in the world. Very hard to be protected there. And like with all the violent rhetoric that we've been hearing and talking about like denaturalization, deportation, being here illegally, calling him a communist, saying we're going to keep our eyes on him, and then having like on a lower level, like not the president, like I'm talking about now, we have even on a lower level people just explicitly talking about like 9/11 for no reason because of the fact that he's Muslim. Like it's insane that people are like, oh, 9/11 happened 24 years ago, I guess we forgot. Like, what does he have to do with that? It's insane to make those bridges. It's scary to make those bridges. But I see it time and time again with Mamdani specifically, after this election especially. But I think it's only going to rise, especially with Trump's rhetoric, especially with Trump's truth socials or tweets or whatever you want to call them, his truths. It's scary, but we'll see how it continues. I do fear for Mamdani's safety quite a bit. This country's rhetoric is only getting worse and worse. We're only being more bipartisan as the day goes on, or as the years go on, and as this administration goes on.
By limiting the power of judges to stop his executive orders or to freeze his executive orders, how big a deal is this? This was really the one way, the one restraint on his actions that's been effective so far.
Well, it was an unfortunate decision from a procedural standpoint as it relates to what should have been a very clear case. If there is any instance where nationwide injunctions are appropriate, it would be in a manner like what we've just experienced in terms of birthright citizenship, which is clearly a part of the Constitution. If you are born as a child in the United States of America, you are a citizen. So it was a procedural setback that was quite unfortunate, and it was a reckless decision in my view. However, in terms of the fight judicially to protect birthright citizenship, that remains alive and well. And we're just going to have to intensify our efforts now in district court after district court, or to get a class action certified on behalf of people who may be adversely impacted by this reckless Trump executive order.
And
it was also very interesting that the Supreme Court didn't really rule on the birthright aspect of that judicial case, and they talked about like the federal injunctions rather than that. That's also kind of scary. The fact that birthright citizenship being directly in the Constitution wasn't mentioned whatsoever by the Supreme Court in a decision so big as one that denied federal injunctions. I mean, I think, like you said, we're going to see a lot more class actions, or we're going to see a lot more rulings district by district, which makes it so like we go back to being just like a loosely formed collection of countries that are just have different laws and rules because of the fact that our judicial can be completely different in one area to the other. And it also kind of scares me because it reminds me of how with the deportations and with like the abductions of people that have like visas or student visas or work visas, the fact that they abducted them, put them on flights to places with better judicial or judicial like courts that favored them, like the Trump administration. The fact that they were doing that even just months ago and they are doing it now, if we continue to have like judicial decisions on a local level that can't be disputed by a different state or a different judge, like if it's not federal and it's just like state by state, I fear like one state like Georgia or Tennessee or Texas is going to have some insane rules about birthright citizenship or about the ways that they deport people. I mean, I know we had the Supreme Court decisions that was about deporting people to third or to other countries that they didn't come from whatsoever, and so that alone is already pretty scary. But I do fear what they're going to use this for in the future, with the fact that judicial decisions don't matter across the country. They are extremely localized, and they're very, very much in a bubble. And I think we're going to continue to see people being moved from jurisdiction to jurisdiction because of the fact that one jurisdiction favors the Trump administration. So it'll be scary.
You were at the briefing, the classified briefing Friday on Iran and on the U.S. airstrikes. Did you get satisfactory answers? And do you have a sense now? Was the program really, I mean, President says obliterated, but what did you learn?
Well, let's be clear. Iran is a sworn enemy of the United States of America, as well as our allies in the Middle East, like Israel and Jordan, and we can never allow Iran to be a nuclear-capable power. That said, there are a lot of questions that remain unanswered, in my view, as it relates to the actions that the Trump administration took relative to Iran. Why did they not seek the congressional authorization required by the Constitution for this type of preemptive strike? I still haven't seen facts presented to us as a Congress to justify that step, and I certainly haven't seen facts to justify the statement that Donald Trump made that Iran's nuclear program has been completely and totally obliterated. We also need the case to be made by the administration to the American people as to how to best accomplish the objective of preventing Iran from becoming nuclear capable. Why did they abandon the aggressive diplomacy that was successful under the Obama administration? And what is their plan to stop us from getting into another failed Middle Eastern war? A lot of questions that need to be answered, and those answers haven't been compelling to date.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'll lightly touch on that. This was mostly supposed to be about Mamdani, but when it comes to what he just said about Iran, it's crazy that his first response was they're our sworn enemy. Like, they have a reason to be against us, in my opinion, like just from historical aspects. Invading the countries, two of their neighboring countries, and affecting regime change in the past, instilling like a leader that was very brutal, very dictator-y, I guess. He was a dictator, honestly, and he was very brutal against his constituents, and that was kind of how they ended up revolting and how they ended up becoming the state that they are today, because of the fact that we overthrew their regimes, their democratically elected people, because we disagreed with maybe some certain socialist policies that we felt were just too communist in the 50s or 60s or whatever. Or we wanted their oil, probably, I imagine, or they wanted to privatize oil, and so we were like, hey, that's not all right, we want your oil, and we want to make all the profit off of it. And so the fact that they wanted all the profit off of the oil in their own country was probably too much for us. So we went ahead and did some regime change. And so now they say death to the U.S., death to Israel, because of what we did. And so it's crazy that we just demonize them. We pretend that, like, they're the problem, they're the issue, and we had no part to play in it. It's crazy. Especially that his first response is that Israel is our best friend in the Middle East. And we just demonize Iran. We demonize any kind of Muslims in the Middle East. We demonize anybody that's not for us. So it makes sense that that's his opinion. And I saw a video of, what's his name? Tim Walz is his name, I think, talking about, like, in the 2024 election, I know Kamala didn't say enough about Israel. And or didn't say enough about Gaza, I should say, but we had that video of Tim Walz saying that Iran should never have a weapon and that Israel is our best friend. Let me find it. Yeah, I think it's this one.
Governor Walz, if you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran? You have 2 minutes.
A nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment.
Senator Vance, the same question.
What the? You skipped his whole response? I guess what I was just thinking of was Hakeem Jeffries also mentioned that Donald Trump stopped the diplomacy aspect with Iran, and he mainly seemed to mention, like, in the past few years, like, or weeks at this point, but everybody throws out the window the fact that Trump was the one who got us out of the Iran nuclear deal, or the JCPOA or whatever. and the fact that Iran completely decommissioned all of their uranium until after we pulled out and after we reissued sanctions on them. So now the fact that we bombed them and we're going, okay, let's not fight anymore, and they completely stopped the IAEA or whatever, IAEA, the International Atomic Energy people. They stopped them from continuing to do like searches of their nuclear facilities because of Trump's strikes. So we've only gone further backwards on diplomacy. We've gone further backwards on knowing what they have. We've gone further backward on them being open to talking to us or liking us as a country. Like Obama was the first president to actually do diplomacy with them and actually go forward and make some sort of agreement with them. And it worked. It worked out pretty well until Trump came in and denounced it. I'm sure Netanyahu was in his ear talking about it the whole time, talking about how they were close to nuclear weapons, even though at that time, according to the IAEA, they had nowhere close to enriched uranium. Like I think they had like 20% or something at that point, and before the agreement, the JCPOA, they actually had more enriched uranium, but then they went ahead during the JCPOA and got rid of it all until Trump pulled us out. And then Trump pulled us out and they started stockpiling, they started buying more centrifuges, they started continuing their Iran nuclear program, and that's kind of how we got to where we are today, even though Netanyahu for the past 20 years has been saying they're going to be 2 weeks away from a bomb or a nuke. We're only really close to it because of the US and Israel's actions. Iran was diplomatic with Obama. Iran was open to discussions the past few weeks, even though I think in the past few years, like the past 4 or 5 years, they did ask for a lot. I think I read, like with Biden, they asked for Biden to give more than he could actually give. Not that I think Biden had much of a conversation there. I think he probably just had Steve Watkins or whatever, or Witkoff, Steve Witkoff. He probably just had Steve Witkoff talking, and he wasn't really involved in it. So I'm sure there wasn't much actual conversation. But with that, like we've had ever since we pulled out of the JCPOA, things have only gotten worse. And that's because of us, because of Trump, because of Netanyahu probably talking in his ear. And I do think that's what happened with the Iran strike as well. It only probably happened because Netanyahu was in his ears. And he continued to tell him that if he does this strike, this last one strike, like, oh, you're going to be perceived as a winner. You're going to look really good if you do this. And made him look a lot worse. He lost MTG, Marjorie Greene Taylor. He lost Tucker Carlson. He lost Nick Fuentes, I think, or whatever. Like the most right-wing person ever. He's losing so many people because of the fact that he campaigned on being the anti-war candidate. But then he got us this close to being in World War III. And he's only continued to make Iran hate us more and more, which is only going to devolve into more strikes with probably Israel, and then that's going to get us pulled into things again because we contribute to fund them, we contribute to give them money, we contribute to fight with them, we continue to give them intel and resources, and we continue to listen to them, even though they've been pushing war on so many countries for so long, and that's really how they were founded. But let's listen to Tim Walz talk about it.
Tonight with the Middle East. Margaret. Thank you, Nora. Earlier today, Iran launched its largest attack yet on Israel, but that attack failed thanks to joint U.S. and Israeli defensive action. President Biden has deployed more than 40,000 U.S. military personnel and assets to that region over the past year to try to prevent a regional war. Iran is weakened, but the U.S. still considers it the largest state sponsor of terrorism in the world, and it has drastically reduced the time it would take to develop a nuclear weapon. It is down now to 1 or 2 weeks' time. Governor Walz.
This was 8 months ago, by the way. 1 to 2 weeks. 1 to 2 weeks. And, it was like 10 months ago. But 1 to 2 weeks. 1 to 2 weeks. It's been 1 to 2 weeks for 20 years. 1 to 2 weeks, they'll have a nuke.
If you were the final voice in the Situation Room, would you support or oppose a preemptive strike by Israel on Iran?
Damn, they even used the word preemptive back then. That's crazy. Preemptive strike in 2024. Before they actually did it, they were using that wording. They were building this up for a while now, I guess. I wonder if it was because they were trying so hard to get Biden to allow it or join their side of things.
Ron, you have 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, and thank you for those joining at home tonight. Let's keep in mind where this started. October 7th, Hamas terrorists...
He looks so scared. Those eyes. Oh my god. Oh my god. He was a good candidate, but his views on Israel and just his public talking was not all there.
Massacred over 1,400 Israelis and took prisoners. Israel's ability to be able to defend itself is absolutely fundamental. Getting its hostages back, fundamental, and ending the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. But the expansion of Israel and its proxies is an absolute fundamental necessity for the United States.
Expanding Israel and its proxies is a fundamental necessity for the United States? All right. So we're open to imperialism as long as it's Israeli imperialism.
Have the steady leadership there. You saw it experienced today, where along with our Israeli partners and our coalition, able to stop the incoming attack. But what's fundamental here is that steady leadership is going to matter. It's clear, and the world saw it on that debate stage a few weeks ago, a nearly 80-year-old Donald Trump talking about crowd sizes is not what we need in this moment. But it's not just that.
So
it's those that were closest to Donald Trump.
Yeah, okay. So then he stopped talking about it and he moved on to Donald Trump, which is what we tend to do in politics, especially in the DNC. We just kind of whataboutism our way into Trump. Why did Walls answer the question attacking Trump instead of answering the question? Yeah, it's a common theme. It's kind of all they run on. It's not new policy. It's keeping the status quo while being against Trump. No real changes, no policies being put forward, no differences being made. It's just being anti-Trump or anti-whatever they disagree with at that moment, whatever brings them back to the status quo, which is just being funded by the lobbyists, not making real changes, and then waiting for the Republicans to be elected for bad things to happen to then say, oh, we're the savior, we can fix this, we'll stop it, we'll do affordability. But yeah, it's not surprising, especially from the 2024 Tim Walz being the vice president for Kamala Harris. It was just kind of that election kind of felt like not a precursor, but maybe a precursor to like my at least recognizing of the DNC being so money hungry and so status quo driven and so not open to change, honestly, like even just in policies. And we saw Biden try to do student loan relief, didn't go anywhere when it came to like Congress whatsoever. There was no real change there. Nobody really tried other than Biden at the time, but I think his was mostly through executive orders, which were swatted down quite a bit by the federal injunctions. So there wasn't too much of a actual change, even through just Biden. But yeah, I think that was kind of everything I wanted to touch on for today. I know I kind of went off topic after starting with the Mamdani stuff. But yeah, that was my first stream. I probably end up doing it again either tomorrow night or Thursday night, and continuing from here. But I feel like that was a good first stream. And I hope we garner some more attention next time. Hopefully have some more people to talk to. Kind of maybe more debating, well, maybe not debating, but just discussing of policies, politics. So yeah, thanks for watching, and hopefully I'll see you guys next time.